What I learned really quickly as like a high achieving, career driven person who had this physical injury happen to them that was very like life changing in the moment and was very life changing very quickly was that I got assigned the role of you are supposed to be inspiring. You are supposed to be super positive, you're supposed to be inspiring, you're supposed to remind people that if they ever end up in this horrible situation that they're very afraid of, because all of us know deep down that you could be me at any moment in time, that they could get through it. You're supposed to be this like shining beacon of hope in what is ultimately an uncontrollable and very frightening prospect of being human and being fragile. Getting assigned that role from the person across from me took me out of my humanity. It reduced me down to something flat and a caricature of myself. And while I did also want to be positive, I wanted to live a good life after my injury and still be excited. And I recognized that I was lucky to have health insurance and a family that cared and friends that supported. I also was more than that. I wasn't just this inspiration for the person sitting across from me, I was a person. And the second that I saw that person flatten me into this societally assigned role, I couldn't help but feel disconnected from them. And that loneliness, that gap between who I was and who these people knew that I was, and who society had conditioned them to react to me as, that gap was loneliness. And that was what took the largest toll on my mental health. Over time, experiencing that loneliness over and over and over in conversation after conversation after conversation triggered me into this deep depression that had nothing to do with the amount of pain I was in and a whole lot to do with the fact that I thought that pain meant that I couldn't connect to people anymore.
Yeah, I feel that the loneliness is something I've experienced too. Like, I mean, I had for years I was basically disabled by what people kept saying was depression, but I now understand was PTSD, like acute PTSD. And one of the things that was so hard about it, and I've committed, like I've studied filmmaking. I might make a movie about it because I just want people to understand what it's like. It was so frustrating to be like, why can't I get people to fucking understand that everything is impossibly hard? And I didn't have any kind of physical manifestation. I didn't have a diagnosis, but that was the hardest part on my mental health too, the depression, because I think the depression and loneliness and depression and isolation and disconnection are basically synonymous for us as creatures. I mean, you mentioned we started this conversation talking about psychedelics. They act on the serotonin 2A receptor, right? And a lot of people will say in medicine, oh, serotonin regulates mood. I don't think so, because like plants have serotonin, and I don't think plants have mood. And also, like lobsters and other creatures have serotonin systems. I think it regulates social behavior. And because we're social creatures, we experience disruptions in our sociality as depression or mania or whatever. And one of the most reliable ways to torture someone is to isolate them. You can probably attest to
Mhm.
that from coming from criminal justice. And there is a kind of loneliness that, if you haven't experienced it, is hard to intellectualize, of being alone in a crowd of people, like feeling completely and totally alone everywhere you go, no matter how many people are around you. And in fact, the more people that are around, the lonelier you feel. And that's just, I've had that experience. And it's coming up for me just hearing your story and saying, like, that's the hardest part, is just not being able to get people to understand and feeling like you're a burden for even wanting them to.